The great chamber of Nexira Prime was cold. Not the kind of cold that came from low temperatures, but the kind that came from being surrounded by beings who did not want you there. Ambassador Daniel Harrison felt it the moment. He stepped through the massive doors with his small delegation behind him. The chamber was built for giants. Pillars of black stone rose hundreds of feet into the air. Floating platforms held delegates from 12 different alien species. Some had scales. Some had too many eyes. Some did not have bodies at all, but existed as clouds of light and energy. All of them looked down at the 6 humans standing on the floor below. Daniel had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. He had negotiated trade deals with the stubborn miners of Titan. He had calmed tensions between Earth and the Mars colonies during the water crisis of 2847. He had talked armed rebels into surrendering without a single shot fired, but nothing had prepared him for this. Lieutenant Commander Catherine Price stood at his right side. She was officially his aide, but unofficially his closest advisor. Her sharp eyes moved constantly across the chamber. She was counting exits and measuring distances and calculating odds. Old habits from her years in military intelligence died hard. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at his left. The old negotiator had been doing this job since before Daniel was born. His face showed nothing but calm patience. Behind them stood Captain Lisa Donovan and 2 of her security officers. Their ceremonial uniforms hid the compact weapons underneath. Everyone hoped those weapons would not be needed. High Counselor Draxus of the Vexery Dominion rose from his elevated platform. He was 8 feet tall, with gray skin stretched over thick muscles. 4 yellow eyes sat in a face that had never learned to smile. His voice boomed through the chamber like thunder rolling. Across mountains, he welcomed the human delegation to the council chambers. He said that after months of discussion, the council had prepared terms for lasting peace between humanity and the civilized galaxy. He spoke these words as if he were offering a great gift. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber. Text appeared in the common galactic language and in English. Daniel read the terms and felt his stomach drop. Humanity would surrender 70% of all colonial territories immediately. Human military vessels would be reduced to patrol craft only. All warships would be destroyed under council supervision. Human expansion beyond the Orion Arm would be banned forever. Human scientists would submit all research to council review. Human leaders would report to council oversight. Committees in exchange, the council would permit humanity to continue existing. Catherine drew in a sharp breath beside him. Daniel heard Lisa shift her weight behind him. Even Marcus let some emotion show on his weathered face. The Silthine delegate spoke next. It existed as a column of pale light that pulsed with each word. It explained that these terms were more than fair. It said that humans were a young species. Barely 300 years in space, other races had walked among the stars for 10,000 years or more. Humans could not be trusted with the responsibilities of true spacefaring civilization. They were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. Clicking sounds filled the chamber. The Crix delegation was laughing. They looked like insects the size of horses with mandibles that could cut through steel. Their clicks said what they thought of humanity. Daniel stood very still. He thought about Earth. He thought about the colonies. He thought about the billions of human beings who had sent him here, hoping for peace. They had trusted him to find a way forward. They had not sent him here to surrender everything their ancestors had built. He thought about his daughter. She was 17 and wanted to be an explorer. She dreamed of seeing new worlds and meeting new peoples. Under these terms, she would never leave the tiny box the council wanted to trap humanity inside. High Counselor Draxus asked if the human delegation accepted the wisdom of the council. Daniel looked back at his team. Marcus shook his head slowly. The message was clear. These were not terms anyone could accept. Catherine met his eyes, and he saw cold fire there. Lisa had her hand near her weapon, though she had not moved it. Daniel turned back to face the council. 12 species watched him from their high platforms. They expected him to beg. They expected him to bargain. They expected him to do what every other young species had done when faced with the power of the galaxy. They expected him to kneel. He reached into his coat and removed his credentials. The holographic seal of Earth's united government glowed blue and gold. He had carried these credentials for 15 years. They represented everything he had worked for, everything he believed in. He placed them on the podium in front of him. His voice was steady when he spoke. He said that humanity had come here seeking peace. He said they had crossed vast distances and waited patiently and shown every sign of good faith. He told them what the council offered was not peace, but chains. And he told them that humanity rejected their terms. Draxus rose to his full height. His 4 eyes blazed with anger. He said rejection was not permitted. He said humanity would accept the wisdom of ancient races. He said this was not a request. Daniel smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had made a decision and would not turn back from it. He told them that humanity had a saying, peace through mutual respect or no peace at all. He announced that his delegation was leaving. He said that when the council was ready to speak to humanity as equals, they knew where to find Earth. Until that day, humanity would chart its own course among the stars. He turned and walked toward the chamber doors. His team fell into step around him. Behind them, the chamber erupted. Draxus roared commands. The cricks clicked furiously. The silthine pulsed with angry red light. A dozen voices shouted in a dozen languages. The humans kept walking. Catherine matched his stride as they passed through the great doors. She spoke quietly so only he could hear. She asked if he understood what they had just done. Daniel nodded. He understood perfectly. They had refused to bow. They had chosen dignity over safety. They had told the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy that humanity would not be bullied. He told her they had shown the galaxy that humanity would not kneel. Not today, and not ever. The doors closed behind them. The shouting faded. Ahead lay the long walk back to their ship and the longer journey home. Behind lay the ruins of peace and the promise of war. Daniel did not look back. Whatever came next, humanity would face it standing tall. That was all that mattered. That was everything that mattered. Their ship waited at the docking port. It was small compared to the massive vessels of the elder races, but it was human. It was theirs. And it would carry them home to prepare for whatever storm was coming. As the ship lifted off from Nexira, prime and jumped into hyperspace, Daniel allowed himself one moment of doubt. He wondered if he had just doomed his species. Then he remembered the looks on those alien faces. The contempt, the arrogance, the absolute certainty that humans were nothing. No, he had not doomed humanity. He had given them a chance to prove what they truly were. The galaxy would learn soon enough. The stars waited, and humanity was coming. News traveled fast in the galaxy, faster than light, faster than ships. Within 6 hours of the human delegation walking out of the peace conference, every inhabited world knew what had happened. The reactions varied from species to species, but most shared one common emotion: disbelief. Hi. Counselor Draxus stood before the council in an emergency session. His gray face was darker than usual. Anger burned in all 4 of his yellow eyes. He had never been defied before. No species had ever walked away from the council. The insult was beyond anything he could comprehend. He demanded immediate action. He called for a unified fleet to remind humanity of its place in the galactic order. These creatures had been among the stars for only 3 centuries. The Vexery had ruled their sector for 15,000 years. The very idea that humans thought themselves equal was laughable. It was offensive. It would not stand. The council voted. 11 species supported military action. Only the Mallory abstained. Their ambassador was an ancient being with silver fur and wise eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. She spoke softly, but her words carried weight. She warned the council that they were making a mistake. She said she had studied human history. She had read their books and watched their recorded wars. She told them that humans did not respond to threats the way other species did. When pushed, they did not retreat. They pushed back harder. Draxus dismissed her concerns. He said the Mallory had grown soft in their old age. He said a show of overwhelming force would bring humanity to its knees within weeks. The matter was settled. On Earth, the mood was different. President Catherine Morrison addressed the United Assembly in Geneva. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every nation and colony. Billions more watched on screens across human space. She spoke calmly, but firmly. She said humanity had gone to Nixora Prime with open hands and honest hearts. They had been met with contempt and demands for surrender. She said this would not stand. Earth would not bow. The colonies would not bow. No human would bow to those who saw them as lesser beings. The assembly rose in thunderous applause. Old divisions between nations faded in that moment. There was no more East or West, no more Earth or Mars. There was only humanity united against a common threat, in orbital shipyards around the solar. System work began immediately. Admiral Kevin Walsh oversaw operations from the command carrier Resolute. He was 62 years old with gray hair and steady hands. He had commanded ships for 40 years and had hoped to retire peacefully. That hope was gone now. His aide commander Nicole Palmer brought him the latest intelligence reports. The Council fleet was assembling near the Centauri Gate. 42 capital ships from 8 different species, 600 support vessels, transport ships carrying over 2 million soldiers. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Kevin studied the numbers in silence. Nicole asked him if their fleet could match such strength. He shook his head. They had 18 capital ships, 300 combat-ready vessels of various sizes. Their soldiers numbered in the hundreds of thousands, not millions. By any conventional measure, they were hopelessly outmatched. Nicole asked what they were going to do. Kevin looked up from the reports and out the viewport. Beyond the glass, Mars hung red and beautiful against the stars. Construction drones swarmed around half-finished warships. Welders flashed like fireflies in the darkness of space. He told her that the Council expected them to fight the way other species did. They expected formation battles and honorable engagements and graceful surrender when the odds became impossible. He smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. He said humans did not fight that way. They never had. When facing superior numbers, humans did not line up and wait for death. They hid and waited and struck from shadows. They turned their enemy's strength into weakness. They sacrificed everything to win. Nicole asked if he had a plan. Kevin nodded slowly. He told her to begin evacuating the outer colonies. Move the civilians underground. Strip the cities of anything useful and leave them empty. He wanted the Council fleet to find nothing but ghosts when they arrived. Nicole looked uncertain. She said they would be abandoning their homes. Kevin met her eyes. He told her that homes could be rebuilt. Humanity could not. He ordered her to give the commands, and she left to carry them out. Across human space, the Great Migration began. Millions of people left their homes carrying only what they could hold. They moved into bunkers and hidden stations built into asteroids and moons. They went quietly and quickly, knowing that their survival depended on speed. The Council fleet departed for human space 3 weeks later. Fleet Commander Verax led the armada. He was a Vexery warrior who had never lost a battle. He expected this campaign to add another easy victory to his record. His ships jumped through hyperspace and emerged in the Alpha Centauri system. Verax stood on the bridge of his flagship and surveyed the human colony world before him. It was silent. No signals. No ships. No defenses. He sent scouts to the surface. They reported empty cities and abandoned farms. It was as if the humans had simply vanished. Verax felt the first stirring of unease. Where had they gone? Was this some kind of trick? He ordered his fleet to proceed toward Earth. Whatever games the humans were playing would end when he reached their homeworld. They would surrender, or they would die. Those were the only options he was prepared to offer. The great fleet moved through human space like a wave of destruction. Planet after planet. Colony after colony. All empty. All silent. All waiting. Verax did not understand. No species had ever abandoned their territory so completely. No species had ever refused to stand and fight. What were these humans doing? The answer would come soon enough. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. Far ahead in the darkness of the Sol system, Admiral Kevin Walsh watched the approaching fleet on his tactical display. 50 billion humans were hiding in the shadows, waiting for his command. Weapons platforms drifted silent among the asteroids. Stealth ships hung motionless in the void. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for the prey to walk into it. Kevin allowed himself a small smile. The Council thought they were hunting humans. They had no idea that humans were the greatest hunters the galaxy had ever seen. Let them come. Let them learn. The Council fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Fleet Commander Verax stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked upon the human homeworld for the first time. Earth hung in the distance like a blue jewel against the black velvet of space. It was beautiful. It was defenseless. It was about to become the newest territory of the Galactic Council. Verax ordered his ships to advance. 42 capital ships moved forward in perfect formation. 600 support vessels spread out in protective screens. Transport ships, carrying 2 million soldiers, followed behind, ready to deliver the invasion force. The journey through the outer system was quiet. Too quiet. They passed the orbits of Neptune and Uranus without seeing a single human vessel. Saturn and its moons were dark and empty. Jupiter showed no signs of activity. It was as if humanity had simply given up. Some of the junior officers expressed concern. They wondered where the human fleet was hiding. Verax silenced them with a glare. He declared that the humans were cowards who had fled at the sight of true power. They would find them cowering on their homeworld, begging for mercy. The fleet passed through the asteroid belt. Millions of rocks drifted silently in the darkness. Sensors showed nothing unusual. Just stone and ice and empty space. Captain Lisa Donovan watched the enemy fleet from the bridge of her stealth ship Defiance. The vessel was painted black and running on minimal power. 2 enemy sensors? It looked like just another asteroid among millions. 12 other stealth ships waited nearby, equally invisible. She checked her tactical display. The Council fleet was moving exactly where Admiral Walsh had predicted. They were heading straight for Earth, taking the most direct route. They were not bothering to check the asteroids or scan the moons. They were confident and careless. Lisa smiled. Confidence was good in a warrior. Overconfidence was fatal. Admiral Kevin Walsh sat in the command center of the Resolute, hidden in a hollowed-out asteroid near Mars. Screens surrounded him, showing feeds from thousands of hidden sensors. He watched the Council fleet approach and waited for the perfect moment. Nicole Palmer stood beside him, monitoring communications. She reported that all units were in position. Weapons platforms were armed and ready. Stealth ships were standing by. Ground defense batteries on Luna and Mars were prepared to fire. Kevin nodded. He told her to hold. Not yet. Let them get closer. The Council fleet reached Earth orbit. Verax looked down at the blue planet and smiled. He ordered the first wave of landing craft to begin their descent. 500 troop carriers dropped from the transport ships and headed for the surface. They targeted the major cities: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow. They would secure the capitals and force surrender within hours. The landing craft entered the atmosphere. They screamed through the sky, leaving trails of fire behind them. Soldiers prepared for combat, checking weapons and armor. They expected scattered resistance at most. The humans had no real military anymore. The first carrier was 50 kilometers from New York when the sky lit up. Plasma batteries hidden in the Appalachian Mountains opened fire. Beams of superheated energy sliced through the air and struck the landing craft. Ships exploded in brilliant fireballs. Soldiers died without ever seeing the enemy. On the bridge of his flagship, Verax watched in shock as the first wave was destroyed in seconds. Before he could issue orders, his communications officer shouted a warning. Contacts were appearing everywhere. From the asteroid belt, weapons platforms activated. Railguns accelerated tungsten projectiles to near light speed. The slugs crossed the distance to the fleet in moments and punched through armor like needles through cloth. A Vexary dreadnought took 3 hits to its engine section and exploded. From the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, hidden batteries opened fire. Missiles launched by the thousands streaking toward the Council fleet on trails of blue flame. Point defense systems tried to intercept them, but there were too many. From the darkness between planets, stealth ships decloaked. Captain Lisa Donovan gave the order and the Defiance fired everything it had. Torpedoes struck the engine section of a Krix carrier. The massive insectoid ship broke apart, spilling bodies and debris into space. Vorax screamed orders. Return fire. Destroy the hidden platforms. Form defensive formations. But his fleet was in chaos. Ships collided, trying to maneuver. Captains shouted conflicting commands. The precision formation that had entered the SOSL dissolved into confusion. Admiral Walsh watched the battle unfold on his screens. He opened a channel to all human forces. He told them that this was the moment they had trained for. He reminded them that the enemy had come to conquer their home. He ordered them to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The battle raged for 11 hours. Human forces struck and retreated and struck again. They used asteroids for cover. They laid traps and ambushes. They sacrificed damaged ships by ramming them into enemy vessels. They fought with a fury that the Council's species had never witnessed. Lisa Donovan lost count of how many kills the Defiant scored. Her ship took damage. Fires broke out on 3 decks. A hull breach killed 12 crew members. But she kept fighting. They all kept fighting. By hour 8, the Council fleet had lost 17 capital ships. Over 200 support vessels drifted dead in space. Transport ships burned. Soldiers died by the hundreds of thousands. Vorax stood on his damaged bridge surrounded by flames and bodies. He could not understand what was happening. His fleet outnumbered the humans. His ships were larger and more powerful. Victory should have been simple, but humans did not fight fairly. They did not stand in formation and exchange fire like civilized beings. They attacked from shadows. They used tricks and traps. They refused to die even when death was certain. A Vexary officer reported that fleet strength had dropped below 50%. Another hit shook the flagship. Alarms screamed warnings about failing systems. Varix made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered a retreat. All surviving ships were commanded to fall back to the hyperspace gate and withdraw from the system. The Council fleet fled. Broken ships limped toward safety. Behind them, the wreckage of their invasion force drifted among the asteroids. Humanity had won. On the resolute Admiral Walsh watched the enemy retreat. Nicole asked if they should pursue. Kevin shook his head. He said to let them run. Let them carry the story back to the Council. Let every species in the galaxy know what happened when you tried to conquer humanity on Earth. People emerged from bunkers and shelters. They looked up at the sky where distant explosions still flickered like dying stars. They had survived. Against impossible odds, they had survived. Catherine Price stood beside Daniel Harrison watching the news feeds. She said quietly that they had done it. Daniel nodded, but his expression was serious. He told her that this was only the beginning. The Council would not accept this defeat easily. More battles would come. Harder choices would follow. But for now, humanity stood unbroken. And that was enough. The remnants of the Great Fleet limped back too. Nexira Prime, of the 42 capital ships that had departed, only 23 returned. Many of those were damaged beyond repair. Of the 2 million soldiers sent to conquer Earth, fewer than 800,000 came home. High Counselor. Draxus stood in the Council chamber and listened to Fleet Commander Varix deliver his report. The warrior spoke in a hollow voice. His confidence was gone. His certainty was shattered. He described battles fought in darkness against enemies who appeared from nowhere. He spoke of weapons that moved faster than thought. He told of human ships that rammed his vessels rather than accept defeat. The Council chamber was silent. No clicking laughter from the Krix now. No glowing arrogance from the Silthan. Fear had replaced contempt on every alien face. Draxus demanded explanations. How could this happen? The Council fleet had been the largest military force ever assembled. How could primitives defeat such power? Virax had no answer. He only knew what he had witnessed. Humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They did not follow the rules of civilized warfare. They did not accept odds or acknowledge superior numbers. They simply refused to lose. Intelligence reports began arriving from across human space. The abandoned colonies had been a trap. Populations had hidden in underground bunkers and asteroid shelters. The empty cities had been filled with sensors and automated weapons. Every step the Council fleet took had been watched and measured. Worse still, the humans were not waiting for another attack. They were striking first. Human strike groups appeared at Council supply stations, destroying fuel depots and ammunition stores. Commando teams infiltrated military installations, planting explosives and stealing information. A species that should have been celebrating survival was instead pressing the attack. The Mallory ambassador requested permission to speak. The ancient being rose slowly from her seat. Her silver fur was duller than it had been. She looked tired. She looked sad. She reminded the Council that she had warned them. She had told them to study human history before making demands. Now perhaps they would listen. She said that humans did not view war the way other species did. For most civilizations, war was a contest, a test of strength to determine which side was superior. The losing side would acknowledge defeat and accept terms. Honor would be preserved. Humans did not think this way. For them, war was survival, pure and simple. They did not fight to prove strength. They fought to continue existing, and they would sacrifice anything to achieve that goal. She described examples from human history. She told of ancient cities burned by their own defenders, rather than let enemies occupy them. She spoke of soldiers who starved themselves to feed their armies. She recounted stories of warriors who charged certain death while singing songs of defiance. She paused and looked around the chamber at the frightened faces. She told them that the Council had not declared war on a species. They had declared war on an idea. The idea that freedom was worth any price? The idea that death was preferable to slavery? She asked them. How they could fight against such a thing. Silence hung over the chamber. For the first time since the Council was formed thousands of years ago, no one had an answer. On Earth, the celebrations were muted. President Catherine Morrison knew that one victory did not win a war. The Council would regroup. They would adapt. They would return with new strategies and greater numbers. Admiral Kevin Walsh met with her in the presidential office. His uniform was rumpled, and his eyes were tired. He had not slept properly in weeks. He presented the casualty reports. Humanity had lost 4 capital ships and 87 smaller vessels. Over 30,000 soldiers and crew had died in the battle. Compared to Council losses, it was a small number. But every name on that list was a son or daughter, a mother or father, a friend or loved one. Catherine asked what came next. Kevin told her they had to keep pressure on the Council. They could not allow them time to rebuild and rearm. Human strike teams would continue hitting strategic targets. They would make the Council bleed for every day this war continued. He paused before continuing. He said there was another option. The Council had been humiliated. Their fleet was shattered. Their confidence was broken. If humanity offered peace now, they might accept reasonable terms. Catherine considered this carefully. She asked if he thought the Council was ready for peace. Kevin admitted he did not know. Draxus was proud and stubborn. He might refuse any offer just to save face, but other Council members might feel differently. Fear was a powerful motivator. Catherine made her decision. She told him to continue military operations, but keep them limited. Do not push the Council into desperation. Leave them room to choose peace if they wanted it. Far away on Nexira Prime, that choice was being debated. Draxus wanted to continue the war. He demanded that the Council rebuild its fleet and launch another invasion. He would not accept defeat at the hands of primitives, but other voices spoke against him. The Krix ambassador noted that their species had lost 3 hive ships. The cost was too high. The Silthine representative observed that humans had demonstrated technology that rivaled their own. Perhaps the assumption of human inferiority was flawed. The Mellory ambassador spoke again. She suggested that maybe it was time to consider a different approach. Perhaps instead of trying to subjugate humans, the council should try to understand them. Perhaps there was a way forward that did not require more death. Draxus rejected this as weakness. But he was no longer the unquestioned voice of the council. His certainty had led them to disaster. Others were beginning to wonder if there was another path. On a small human colony world, Daniel Harrison stood looking up at the stars. Catherine Price found him there in the quiet of evening. She told him that she had received word from back channels. The council was fracturing. Some members wanted to continue the war. Others wanted peace. The situation was fluid. Daniel nodded slowly. He said that humanity had proven it could not be conquered. Now they had to prove they could be reasonable. When the time was right, they would offer peace again. But this time they would negotiate from strength, not weakness. Catherine asked when that time would be. Daniel looked at her. He told her it would be soon. The council had learned that humans could fight. Now they needed to learn that humans could also forgive, but only if they asked nicely. Catherine smiled for the first time in weeks. She said she looked forward to that conversation. The stars shone above them. Somewhere out there, enemies were debating the future. Soon, humanity would have its say. And this time, the galaxy would listen. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, a message arrived on Nexora Prime. It came from Earth, carried by a single, unarmed diplomatic vessel. The message was simple. Humanity was willing to discuss peace if the Council was ready to talk as equals. High Counselor Draxus wanted to refuse. His pride still burned from the defeat, but he no longer commanded the unquestioning loyalty of the Council. Too many ships had been lost. Too many soldiers had died. The other species wanted this war to end. The vote was taken. By a margin of 9-3, the Council agreed to new negotiations. But this time, things would be different. This time, the conference would be held on neutral ground, chosen by humanity. This time, no demands would be made before discussions began. The location selected was Luna Station, a new facility built in orbit around Earth's moon specifically for this purpose. It was a statement and a symbol. Humanity would welcome the galaxy to their home, but they would do so on their own terms. Daniel Harrison led the human delegation once again. Catherine Price walked at his side, as always. Dr. Marcus Webb had come out of retirement for this moment. Captain Lisa Donovan provided security. Admiral Kevin Walsh attended as military advisor. They were the same team that had walked out of Nexera Prime. Now they would write a new chapter. The council delegations arrived one by one. Their ships were smaller than before. Their escorts were minimal. They came not as conquerors, but as visitors. High Counselor Draxus was the last to arrive. He walked into the conference chamber with stiff dignity. His 4 eyes swept across the room, taking in the human architecture and human guards and human flags. Everything reminded him of his defeat, but something else caught his attention. The chamber was designed with all delegations at the same level. No elevated platforms. No species looking down on others. Everyone sat as equals around a circular table. Daniel rose to greet the arrivals. His voice was calm and welcoming. He said that humanity was honored to host this conference. He expressed hope that together they could build a peace that would last for generations. Draxus studied the human ambassador. He remembered this man standing in the council chamber, refusing to bow. He remembered the cold certainty in those eyes. He saw that same certainty now, but there was something else too. An openness. A willingness to move forward. The negotiations began. They lasted for 2 weeks. Every issue was discussed and debated. Territory boundaries. Trade agreements. Military limitations. Cultural exchanges. Nothing was simple. Nothing was easy, but slowly progress was made. The Council agreed to recognize all human territories. Humanity agreed to share certain technologies. A mutual defense treaty was proposed. Trade routes were established. Scientific cooperation was planned. The most difficult moment came when the Mallory ambassador raised the question of the past. She asked how they could move forward when so much pain had been caused. How could trust be built on a foundation of war? Daniel thought carefully before responding. He said that humans knew something about rebuilding after conflict. Their own history was filled with terrible wars between nations and peoples. They had learned that peace was not about forgetting the past. It was about choosing a different future. He looked around the table at the faces of 12 alien species. He told them that humanity did not ask the Council to forget what had happened. He asked them to remember it, to remember that humans could be fierce enemies, and to understand that they could also be loyal friends. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the Mellery ambassador nodded slowly. She said that perhaps there was wisdom in human history after all. On the final day of negotiations, the treaty was ready for signing. It was a massive document covering every aspect of the relationship between humanity and the Council. But at its core was one simple principle. All species were equal. All voices mattered. None would be subject to another. Dr. X was the first to sign for the Council. He pressed his palm to the document and watched his genetic signature appear. Then he looked up at Daniel. He asked why. He wanted to know why humanity was offering such generous terms. They had won the war. They could have demanded far more. Daniel considered the question. He said that humanity had not fought for conquest. They had fought for recognition. They wanted to be seen as equals, not masters. Treating the Council the way the Council had tried to treat them would have betrayed everything they stood for. Draxus was silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He bowed his head. It was a gesture of respect among the Vexery, a gesture he had never offered to a younger species. He admitted that the Council had underestimated humanity. They had seen a young species and assumed weakness. They had seen small numbers and assumed vulnerability. They had been wrong. He said that humans had something the elder races had lost. A fire, a determination, a refusal to accept limits. He raised his head and met Daniel's eyes. He told him that the Council did not want humanity as a subject. They wanted humanity as a partner. The galaxy faced threats that no single species could handle alone. With humans standing beside them, perhaps they could face anything. Daniel picked up the treaty document. He added his signature beside the others. As he did, Catherine touched his arm lightly. A small gesture of support and celebration. The chamber erupted in applause. Delegates from 12 species rose to their feet. Enemies became partners in that moment. A new era began. Later that evening, Daniel stood alone at a viewport, watching Earth hang in the sky. The blue and white sphere looked small against the vastness of space. But he knew better now. Size was not strength. Numbers were not power. Humanity had proven that will and courage mattered more. Catherine found him there. She told him that the delegations were asking for him. There were celebrations and toasts and speeches waiting. Daniel nodded but did not move immediately. He told her that he was thinking about his daughter. She had wanted to explore the stars. Now she would have her chance. Not as a subject of the Council, but as a citizen of a recognized power. Catherine smiled. She said they had done it. They had won. Daniel shook his head. He told her they had done something better than winning. They had earned their place. He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the celebrations. Behind him, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun. The same planet that had cradled humanity. Through millennia of struggle and growth, they had come to the stars seeking friendship. They had found contempt. They had answered with courage. And now, at last, they had found their equals. The new dawn had begun, and humanity would face it standing tall.